So journalists, obviously members of the party, and also the ambassadors.
Okay. So, and I think that's really helpful to start getting it covered in the ABC as we start.
I thank the press for being for all our friends. Foreign Office then posted a picture of me with Lord Cameron, saying that he stands by my father's side, which obviously it makes me feel a lot more confident that I will see my father again one day. Lord Cameron mentioned that he raised my father's case with Wang Yi, which is his Chinese counterpart. And for that I'm very grateful. Look, in the end of the day, actions speak louder than words. I am hopeful, so we'll win and see. Well, next year is a huge year for democracy. Hong Kong's telling the rest of the world that it's open for business, that it wants to return to being a financial center, to become, to return to be a financial center. Now, they can't do that if they don't have the rule of law, if they're willing to use that legal system as a weapon to criminalize pro-democracy protests or criminalize journalism. That is not a tenable way to run a financial center. And so by putting my father on trial for these things that are that used to be very much legal, journalism, pro-democracy protests, freedom of speech, they are essentially putting their own freedoms on trial. So international pressure calling Hong Kong out, saying that look, you can't have your cake and eat it too, is immensely important, and I think that's the only way that we'll see him free. For India, Pakistan as well. The UK has obviously the UK has a responsibility to its citizens. I think the British government can, I always like to use the case of Chang Lai, for example. Chang Lai was an Australian and Chinese citizen who was arrested and locked up in China. And the Australian government put her name front and forward every time they dealt with China and called for her release, and now she's back home with her family. So it works. These things work. If more than 80% of the voting population.
Well, Argentina just had their election.
Okay, right. I have no confidence that the trial will be fair in any form. There's three there's three government-appointed judges, and there's no jury. The security minister boasted of 100% conviction rate. This is not going to be a fair trial. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I mean, obviously, it's quite worrying for me, given my father's age and given his, given that he's been in prison for 3 years. But I know that with international pressure, that one day I'll see my father again.
Yeah, he'd be interested in it.
Yeah. Well, next year is a huge year for democracy. My father's story is such an incredibly inspiring story, because he's a man who, as a child, as a 12-year-old, escaped from China to Hong Kong, and fell in love with the freedoms of Hong Kong, the freedoms that the British government had put in place in Hong Kong, which was a colony. And he fell absolutely in love with these freedoms, and he did so much with them. He built a business empire, built a lovely, happy family. But he decided to sacrifice all these things that he had, all these, material wealth, but also all these, spending Christmas with his family and whatnot, to stand up for the freedoms that that he knows we all deserve, that we have in this country, that the democratic freedoms that we have in this country, but he knows that every single person deserves. And then there was an MP, I think the MP for my area actually, her last name is something Wade.
There is widespread condemnation of the prosecution against Jimmy Lai, the fact that he remains in prison. He's been in prison 3 years too long. He ought to be released immediately. He's in prison for exercising his internationally protected rights to freedom of expression, to freedom of assembly, and this is unacceptable. We've had the UN, the Canadian Parliament, the EU Parliament, And foreign governments like the United States call for his release, and it's time the British government stood up and called for his release too. As the international legal team for Jimmy Lai, we are very concerned about the trial next week. The authorities have made it clear they've got a 100% conviction rate in national security cases, so we aren't confident that he will get a fair trial. He is a remarkably principled man who remained in Hong Kong to stand up for democracy, and he is being imprisoned and persecuted for having stood up for democracy and for free speech. He should be released unconditionally and immediately.